Yo, James D. Buzzard, and today we are fixing the SmallRig cage for the Sony ZV-E10. Now, in our last video, we did our overview on this cage, and we came across a pretty major issue for a very limited number of users. And those are for people that are looking to use this multi-interface hot shoe in conjunction with this cage. Now, before there wasn't enough clearance behind this bar to actually plug something in like this godox flash. However, I already went ahead and actually did this fix, and as you can see, even for something with a very big thumb kind of tightening knob right here for the hot shoe, even something as big as this can now fit with this cage attached, and it can communicate with your guys' camera, which it could not before because you guys literally just couldn't push it in far enough to do so. Now, the way I was able to fix this still maintains the overall integrity of your guys' cold shoe, and even though we took 5mm out of this quarter 20, we can still use the quarter 20 with whatever quarter 20 accessories you guys want to screw in here, and it still is pretty dang strong. It might be a little less strong than it was before. However, as long as you guys aren't putting super heavy accessories into that quarter 20, I think you guys will be just fine. Now, before we jump into today's tutorial, I do have to give you guys a quick warning. Anytime that you guys are messing around with hand tools and power tools, there is some risk involved. So if you guys don't feel comfortable using any of these tools, just ask somebody in your life who is comfortable using these tools. And I think between you and them, or you on your own, I think that you guys will have a very easy time following along with this tutorial and getting this super quick little modification done. So let's not waste any more time today. Let's jump into today's tutorial and get this thing fixed. First thing you're gonna do is actually test fit your ECM microphone or whatever hot shoe device you guys are trying to use with your Sony ZV-E10. Step number 2 is you guys are going to make a very small mark with your razor blade right at the point where that accessory is sticking out of the back of the hot shoe. Step number 3, we want to measure the distance from that mark we just made to the back of our accessory. This measurement is going to be the amount of material that we actually need to take off from in front of the multi-interface hot shoe on the actual SmallRig cage. Step number 4, you guys are gonna go ahead and take your micrometer and actually make a score mark where you guys need to make your cuts. So you're gonna make a total of 2 score marks, one on the left side of that multi-interface hot shoe and one on the right side of that multi-interface hot shoe. From here, I'm gonna use a piece of painter's tape, and I'm actually going to remeasure everything out and make sure that all of those score marks are exactly where I need them, right at that 5mm mark. I used 2 pieces of tape. I went ahead and readjusted this so that I had 1 piece of tape inside of the cold shoe and 1 piece of tape that was actually on top of that top bar. That way I can get the cleanest line possible. After I laid down that tape, I went ahead and remeasured out the 5mm just to make sure that my line was exactly where I needed it to be before I make my cuts. Moving into step number 6, go ahead and slide your ECM microphone back in one last time so that we can double check all of our markings. After you guys check your markings, go ahead and get your guys' Dremel tool ready with your metal 1.5-inch cutting disc. And now that we have our Dremel tool ready and we have all of our lines made, we can go ahead and take our camera out of the camera cage. You guys obviously do not want to be doing this with your camera inside of the camera cage when you guys are making these cuts. And you guys don't want your camera even in the vicinity of where you guys are making these cuts, because you guys don't want any of these metal shavings actually anywhere around your camera sensor. So I would advise you guys to just take your camera camera and put it inside or away from where you guys are doing this project. After you guys get your camera out of the cage, go ahead and remove your grip. Now, when you guys go to make your actual cuts, these metal shavings will stick to anything rubber, anything silicone, anything like that. So make sure that you guys take this grip off, because those little metal shavings and flakes will get stuck all over this thing and it will just take you way longer to clean. So to avoid that, we're gonna just take this grip completely off. Now, once you guys have your grip taken off, it is time to go ahead and grab your vise or your clamp or whatever you guys are using to actually hold down your cage while you guys make these cuts. Now, when I first put this thing in the vise, I'm going to lay it lens side down. That way, when I'm making these two vertical cuts right here on the left and right side of that multi-interface hot shoe, I'm literally just going straight down and it's just gonna cut right through it like butter. Now is time to go ahead and start making these cuts. As you guys are making these cuts, go ahead and take your time, go nice and slow, and let the tool do all the work for you guys. You guys shouldn't really be putting a ton of pressure onto this Dremel tool, and just let that blade do all of the cutting for you. Once you guys get that left and right side cut, we're actually gonna reposition the cage in the vise so that it is facing top bar up or top side up. Now that we have it repositioned, go ahead and make the parallel cut with the top bar. This is going to be our last and final cut with our Dremel tool. Once you guys are just about finished with that cut, you guys are gonna notice that the sides of the Dremel tool or the sides of the cutting wheel are actually going to start cutting into this cage where you don't want them to, as you guys can kind of tell on my cage. Now, as soon as I started doing this, I happen to have a very small old cutting disc in my little kit. So I was able to cut almost all the way through, and then I just tapped on what was left of the of that little notch we're cutting out, and it just tapped right out with a little chisel or a little punch. So you guys may need to break that off depending on what cutting tool you guys are using. However, you guys could always actually Dremel it from the bottom, which I didn't think about when I was actually doing this project. So double check and see if you guys can actually hit this from the bottom with your Dremel tool, and that way you guys won't have to use a punch or something like that. However, I do think you guys will get a cleaner result if you guys can just keep on that same cut that you guys started from the top. So if you guys can do it with a smaller, if you guys happen to have a smaller cutting disc, that might help you out. So now we're really at the final step before we start cleaning things up. Right now we're gonna just hit this thing with the file, and we wanna take off all the sharp edges. So any of the sharp edges that were left behind from those cuts, make sure that you guys file those down. That way you guys don't have any burrs or anything like that that are gonna cut you or potentially scratch any of your equipment. So now that we have the notch cut out and we filed down all those sharp edges, you guys can actually go ahead and completely clean your cage up. You guys can take it over to the sink and clean it with just some soapy water, or you guys can clean it with, I just use some 99% alcohol wipes, wiped the whole thing down a few times, blew it off with an air blower. Once this camera cage is all cleaned up, you guys can go ahead and put your grip back on. Once your grip's back on, you guys can then, go ahead and put your camera back in, and you guys can go ahead and grab whatever ECM microphone or ECM accessory you guys are trying to use. For me, I'm trying to use this ECM W2BT receiver, the receiver for the lapel microphone system that Sony has. So I'm gonna go ahead and slide this thing in and make sure that I have plenty of clearance. Now, if everything slides in and fits fine here, then then we can actually move into our next steps, which is actually just cleaning it up. This is completely optional. You guys don't have to spray paint it or clean it up if you guys don't want to. But what I actually did to clean it up was I literally just taped off all of the edges of this top bar, and I literally was just real careful and gave it a couple quick sprays with some black satin Rust-Oleum spray paint. It actually blends in pretty well with the finish that SmallRig puts on here. So I was actually pretty surprised with the overall, it looks pretty clean when you guys are done, especially if you guys choose to spray paint it. If you guys do choose to spray paint this thing, you guys can again grab one of those 99% alcohol wipes, and you guys can actually wipe off any extra overspray or any paint that got anywhere that you didn't want it to go. Make sure you do that when it's still tacky. If you wait until it's dry, it might be too late, and then you'll be picking it off instead of wiping it off. So you guys can use a 99% alcohol and just wipe off any of that tacky paint that might have oversprayed where you didn't want it to, or whatever the case may be. You guys are actually 100% finished with this modification. Not only did we cut that notch out, but we got this thing looking as clean as possible with a little bit of paint, so a little bit of file work and all that. So this thing looks actually really, really good, and this cold shoe is still fully functional since we didn't take too much off of there, which is super, super nice. Another nice thing about this modification is you guys can still actually use this 1/4-20. Now, you can still put a decent amount of torque on that thing, but I would be careful with it just so you don't strip it out or stretch it out or anything like that. You did definitely significantly, you know, reduce the rigidity of that 1/4-20 right there. So just be aware of that. Don't put any super heavy accessories on there. It'll still work for your top handle or whatever else you guys are trying to use. But yeah, so both of those things are still intact, still usable, and we have the functionality now of our multi-interface hot shoe, which is exactly what we wanted. Anyways, that is all I had for today's video. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys are gonna give this modification a try so that you guys can use your multi-interface hot shoe with this cage attached. But that's all I had for today's video, so I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.